Soviet disk detected. To play the Allied missions, please insert the Allied disk.
Hello everyone, I'm a Broken Robot. When it comes to Fallout, I think it's pretty well known that Fallout New Vegas is the standout success of the franchise. While the other games certainly have their charm, Fallout New Vegas is the shining star among the crowd thanks to its captivating story that directly builds off the lore of Fallout 1, Fallout 2, and the cancelled Fallout Van Buren. It's also home to some of the most beloved locations in gaming, such as the New Vegas Strip, Good Springs, and Vault 22. Easily my favorite part of Fallout New Vegas is the intricate web of factions and groups vying for power and dominance over the Mojave Wasteland. It's funny that a decade after release, people still debate the definitive best choice for the Mojave. However, one faction that is often treated like an afterthought is Mr. House, and his dominance over the New Vegas Strip with his army of robots and pre-war technology. While some of the Fallout fanbase treat Mr. House like a tyrant just begging to have his head caved in with a golf club, few players truly grasp why myself and many others will claim that Mr. House is not only the best choice for the Mojave, but I'd even go as far to say that he's humanity's best hope for survival beyond scavenging the corpses of a bygone pre-war civilization. Before we can get into why Mr. House is the proper choice for New Vegas, you have to understand what type of man Robert Edwin House is. Robert House was born on June 25, 2020 and grew up around Las Vegas, Nevada. While as a child he wasn't part of the American high society, his parents' tool manufacturing company allowed both Robert and his older half-brother Anthony to live a comfortable life. Tragically, Robert would be orphaned at the age of 2 when his parents died in a freak accident involving an autogyro and a lightning strike. While Robert's older brother looked after him as he grew up, once he reached his teenage years, Robert realized that he was cheated out of his inheritance by his half-brother Anthony. Their parents had set up their will in a way that both their sons would receive half of their tool company, but due to Robert's young age, his brother managed to get it all and had the legal documentation to prevent Robert from reattaining any stake in his own parents' company. Being estranged by his own brother's greed, he nevertheless managed to achieve attendance to the Commonwealth Institute of Technology and later went on to found Robco Industries in 2042 at the age of 22. While Robert was cheated out of his inheritance, he was a child prodigy and a master of engineering and economics, which he picked up from reading his father's books and listening to college lecture holotapes in his free time as a young boy. Under Robert's leadership, it soon became one of the most profitable corporations in the world, owing mostly to House's considerable technical genius and business know-how. As his company grew during the 2040s and became an international corporation by 2051, he was regarded by his peers with envy and by tabloids as the nation's most eccentric businessman. While Robco focused on electronics and other manufacturing, Robert in his spare time would go on to invent the Protectron, which would lead the way for robotics manufacturing to become a key linchpin for Robco and Robert's grand plan overall. House himself claims that by the age of 30, just 8 years after his company's founding, he had amassed a net worth of at least $30 billion, and had met numerous world leaders and had his own personal stake in the US government as a monopoly holder on most electronics. Though his considerable wealth and power, Robert gained controlling interests in a myriad of other businesses, among them including Repcon Aerospace, the Lucky 38 Hotel and Casino, and Las Vegas Boulevard as a whole.
Before the Great War of 2077, I was the founder, president, and CEO of Robco Industries, a vast computer and robotics corporation. By the time I was 30 years old, I was a billionaire 30 times over. I founded and ran a vast economic empire.
He even went on to buy out roughly 90% of the H&H Tool Company, the family business that would have been his before usurped by his half-brother. Leaving his brother with just a single manufacturing facility, Robert purposely made sure that his elder brother would remain in Vegas so he could watch how his animosity towards his younger brother only came back to bite him, leading Anthony to grow paranoid about Robert attempting to buy out his final facility. However, along with Robert's fame came a certain level of scrutiny over elements of his peculiar personality. A scandal had emerged when he dated a starlet, but their private time was only ever spent with him scanning her brain and making her dress in different outfits, a story that captured the interest of several foreign tabloids. Regardless of his infatuation with snow globes and his desire to advance technology for his own personal pleasure, he still was able to dominate American business with an iron grip. Robco had acquired numerous military contracts and had all but sidelined their competition General Atomics, forcing the two rival companies to partner over the creation of the Mr. Handy robot. Another use of House's time while running his company was regularly designing and running mathematical paradigms based on global political and socio-economic conditions to predict future events. Robert House had produced numerous supercomputers, many of which appearing in the Fallout games themselves. By 2065, he had created a supercomputer so advanced that it could predict real-world events with shocking accuracy. These projections led him to the inexorable conclusion that the world would be engulfed in a nuclear war within 15 years. Armed with the knowledge of his projections, House devoted the duration of his remaining pre-war life into making preparations to ensure that the city of Las Vegas would survive the apocalypse, and that he would live to see the world after the war. Robert had become disillusioned with the US government, and his knowledge of the Enclave and Project Safe House's true intentions led him to abandon wider America and attempt to save his beloved home city. While the primary goal of his countermeasures was to disable incoming nuclear warheads, House included contingencies for directly destroying any that managed to get through. As for House himself, he took equally drastic steps to pave his way to the world of the future, placing his physical body within a life support device, removing House the mortal man from the world permanently, and grafting his own supercomputers into his transhumanist body. While his brain was wired directly into a vast information network by an enormous supercomputer, integral to the successful execution of House's plans was the Platinum chip, containing a vital OS upgrade for his Securitrons and his laser defense network. The chip was to be delivered in the afternoon of October 23, 2077, and if you're familiar with the Fallout franchise, you'll know that this was the day that the Great War took place. A mere 20 hours before the chip's scheduled delivery, the Great War occurred, resulting in the chip being lost in the ruins for the next 200 years. Forced to work with an inferior OS, House endured numerous system crashes, yet ultimately was able to protect Las Vegas from most, but not all of the nuclear warheads aimed at the city. The strain on his system, however, nearly ruined everything House had worked towards, but he persevered in the end. Even so, still forced to rely on a downgraded software over the course of the coming 200 years, House was almost in a constant battle with an inefficient system and was able to control only a small number of his vast military robot army he had constructed. After a series of Matrix crashes, House was left in a coma for several decades, which allowed the remains of Vegas to be picked over by the Wasteland it sat in, and many tribal groups slowly moved into House's domain. But Mr. House would not fall. Instead, he would be fated to rise eventually as the Lord of New Vegas. Thanks to an automatic system reboot, House regained consciousness from his coma in 2138. Instead of immediately revealing himself, he opted instead to wait for certain signs and bided his time. His original plan for being the sole military junta of the Vegas Strip was out of the question, and House recognized that he would have to work with certain elements of the new Wasteland societies. Eventually, he entered the world stage once again in 2274, when Securitrons under his command emerged from the Lucky 38 casino. This action was prompted by his detection of new California Republic scouts arriving at Hoover Dam. In order to establish his rule, he enlisted the help of raider tribes living in New Vegas, who renamed themselves as three families: the Chairman, the Omertas, and the White Glove Society. They rebuilt the city, establishing it as a free economic zone of New Vegas, and styling himself as its president, CEO, and sole proprietor, just in time to welcome the arrival of the new California Republic Army's advanced forces. In exchange for help with Hoover Dam and the permission to use the defunct McCarran International Airport as its headquarters, House signed the New Vegas Treaty, ensuring the cooperation with the NCR and for a time protecting the Strip from annexation. By 2281, House's efforts led to the establishment of New Vegas as a major power in the Mojave Wasteland through lucrative treaties and trade deals with the nearby New California Republic. Guided by his aims to use the Republic's conflict with Caesar's Legion to further expand his control in the region, in all that time House continued to reside in the Lucky 38 casino and control the Securitrons that roamed the New Vegas Strip as his envoys. Thanks to House's knowledge of Project Safe House, House was able to contact the only vault in Las Vegas before the dwellers inside had opened their vault door themselves. House made an offer to the residents of Vault 21, a gamble for ownership of the vault, which he would end up winning, followed by stripping it away of any useful technology, and he had originally planned on permanently sealing the vault away and filling it with concrete. However, House was convinced by Sarah to leave the top section of Vault 21 as it used to be, while allowing her to convert it into a hotel. All the casino equipment was already there from the vault experiment, which would be stripped to serve the visitors of the New Vegas Strip, allowing 4 of the massive pre-war casino buildings to be completely retrofitted.
I oversaw the city's renovations starting from 2274 onward. The 3 families are my employees.
Even after bringing some of Vegas's luster back to the Wasteland, Mr. House's top priority remained reacquiring the Platinum chip from its decade-old resting place. House would do anything in his power to regain control of his grand plan. For years, even before the NCR's revival, House spent cumulative millions of caps on scavenger teams and prospectors to dig it out of the ruins of Sunnyvale, California. This massive cost ultimately paid off in 2281 when the Platinum chip was found after 204 years. Mr. House contracted the delivery of it to the Mojave Express, and to cover up the importance of the package, he arranged for a layered plot involving multiple couriers, most carrying packages with miscellaneous junk items to throw off potential risks, additionally paying mercenary teams to screen the routes to be taken. Yet again, however, the Platinum chip's delivery was halted from within his own power structure. While being carried by Courier 6 to New Vegas, they were intercepted by the chairman's leader Benny around Goodsprings after he was informed of the chip's existence and route by a modified Securitron he called Yes Man. Using a backdoor into House's data stream, he was able to acquire this information. Benny intended to leverage the chip as a means to gain control of the Strip and make it an independent power in the Wasteland, free of Mr. House's sole proprietorship. Though not initially aware of Benny's involvement, House learned the truth after a Securitron, Victor, he had planted in Goodsprings had reported back to him on the chip's theft.
I have to think that he found out about the Platinum chip and mistakenly convinced himself that he could use it to his own ends. One of the problems of a tribal workforce, I'm afraid. No intuitive understanding of how complex technologies can be.
Incensed at the betrayal as he considered Benny a potential protege and his right-hand man, able to achieve tasks he alone could not, House nevertheless had to mask his knowledge of Benny's duplicity until the time came that he could act on it through a new agent. After learning through Victor that the courier had survived the ambush and was making their way from Goodsprings to the Strip, Mr. House began planning to invite them into the Lucky 38 casino in hopes of using their want for revenge on Benny to reclaim the Platinum chip at long last. Many players of Fallout New Vegas are quick to discount Mr. House due to the power dynamic of the relationship you take on when working with him. While the other major factions of Yes Man, Caesar's Legion, and the NCR basically beat you off for just existing, in House's eyes you're nothing more than an employee or a right-hand man at best. Mr. House is a one-man show, and unlike the leaders of other Wasteland factions, he thinks strictly in logic and reason, not allowing emotions or personal gripes to hold him back. House recognized even before the Great War that humanity would never be able to recover to its pre-war state, and that population booms would cause mass violence, further hindering humanity. His grand plan to excel human progress by millennia in just a few centuries compared to the other endgame factions easily shows his superior long-term strategy. Mr. House's grand plan was to use the NCR as a virtual piggy bank to fund his hopes of one day colonizing other planets, an idea that he got from the pre-war Enclave's hopes of building generation ships. Mr. House had no love for the people of New Vegas, and instead would only allow the very best of humanity to be part of his grand plan and future empire in space. He would leave the Earth behind and create a new better world among the stars, and he thought it could be done in as little as 500 years thanks to his pre-war links to Repcon and other industrial titans.
New Vegas is more than a city. It's the remedy to mankind's derailment. The city's economy is a blast furnace in which can be forged the steel of a new rail line running straight to a new horizon. What is the NCR? A society of people desperate to experience comfort, ease, luxury. A society of customers. With all that money pouring in, give me 20 years and I'll reignite the high technology development sectors. 50 years and I'll have people in orbit. 100 years and my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation. I prefer the term autocrat. I would rule as a chief executive. I would not answer to a board of directors or any other entity. Nothing to impede progress. If you want to see the fate of democracies, look out the windows. My judgment. I have no interest in abusing others, just as I have no interest in legislating or otherwise dictating what people do in their private time. Nor have I any interest in being worshipped as some kind of machine god messiah. I am impervious to such corrupting ambitions. But autocracy? Firm control in the hands of a technological and economic visionary? Yes, that Vegas shall have.
When comparing House's grand plan to the other major factions of Yes Man, Caesar's Legion, and the NCR, it's almost night and day. A poor choice for the Mojave is the wild card ending. Despite its popularity among the wider Fallout fanbase, Yes Man is not a good choice for the Mojave. The Courier would lead an independent Vegas for the rest of their natural lives, and when they died, no one could quite predict how many would perish in the power vacuum. It's important to note that the three casino families, which you as the player have to fight to gain their support in the first place, would be quick to fight amongst one another, possibly leading to a breakdown of New Vegas entirely. Also, the Courier likely wouldn't be able to do much with House's Securitron army besides protecting the Strip. The wildcard ending might be fun, but it's far from the best choice for the Mojave or humanity, and leaves New Vegas vulnerable for a multitude of reasons. However, easily the worst choice for the Mojave is Caesar's Legion, which can be reflected by it being the least popular faction in Fallout New Vegas as a whole. The first and most obvious flaw of the Legion ending is that it leads to a giant war tribe of barely civilized Roman cosplayers enslaving and crucifying half of the Mojave Wasteland. And as many in-game characters will tell you, there can't be a Legion without Caesar, or Caesar I guess. And his old age means that once he dies, the Legion of 86 tribes would likely fragment and make the entire region from Arkansas to Nevada unlivable. Even if you think removing Caesar's tumor would buy you time as the Courier to take on the role as the new head of the Legion, the internal power structure being based around one man would be very hard for such a large mass of power to be transferred peacefully. The overall barbarity and shallowness of the Legion doctrine is a far cry from sending humanity to the stars. While some in the audience might stand by the NCR as the best faction for the Mojave and the Wasteland as a whole, the faction has begun to feel the weight of poor planning and weak forces as early as Fallout 2. The NCR embodies all the flaws of pre-war America: government bureaucracy that leads to people dying or worse, racial inequality for ghouls and super mutants, and heavy taxes that make it hard for Wastelanders to scrape by in the name of protection. Speaking of protection, the NCR has stretched themselves so thin that they're internally vulnerable. While compared to the Legion, the NCR is obviously the better choice. Comparing attempts at rebuilding pre-war America to that of House's plans of abandoning Earth altogether shows the fallacy of working with the NCR. It's also important to note that Mr. House will likely be able to live indefinitely thanks to his technology, so he will be around to have a hand in how this space empire works, showing that even though the NCR might be able to provide some pre-war levels of stability, it will never be as intense as what Mr. House plans for humanity.
Don't let the video screens and computer terminals fool you. I'm flesh and blood, not silicone. I see you've made a study of the topic. My knowledge of the science of longevity would fill several textbooks. Perhaps after a decade or two of economic reconstruction, I can commercialize these technologies and offer them to others, such as yourself. Let's just say it was very costly. But I was willing to make the sacrifices longevity entailed, financial and otherwise.
We as the player learn a lot about Mr. House and his personality by the way that he works with the other factions in the Wasteland throughout the House Always Wins questline. For one, as stated by House himself, he has no desire to be a god or king. He simply wants to be an autocrat that can use both business and politics to advance his place in the world. He is mostly happy with allowing the NCR to take over the Mojave if his domain of New Vegas stays under his direct control. A huge misconception about Mr. House and his faction is that he's less of a leader and more of a CEO, running both Vegas and his grand plan the same way he would run Robco. He treats his underlings as employees and, most importantly, has an air of pre-war professionalism that is basically extinct in the Wasteland. He treats his employees with respect so long as they complete their tasks and fill out their contracts. An example of this would be his dealings with the three families. While he initially viewed the Vegas tribals as savages, he was able to take them under his wing and truly civilize them thanks to his professionalism and a thin layer of pre-war corporate bureaucracy. In just a few years, he elevated the savages to the heights of pre-war America, and in return, the Top's leader Benny tries to rebel against his own employer, the Omertas attempt a coup to join Caesar's Legion, and the White Glove Society tries to become cannibals despite it being clearly against the contract that they made with Mr. House.
No, I was not aware of this. Is it really so hard not to engage in cannibalism? My goodness. It's a violation of their contract. I authorize you to deal with them in any way you see fit.
Mr. House overall is pretty morally neutral, so long as you exhibit the mutual respect he places in the courier and his employees. Even he has standards. It would be easy for Mr. House to simply kill off these groups when they rebel against him, but instead he refined them, and thanks to the courier's HR skills, keeps them firmly under his boot in return for living the high life. Moving away from New Vegas itself, Mr. House's interaction with the boomers is proof of his neutral nature. While he could have easily brought them into his company or wiped them out for their bomber technology, he chooses to work with them and even earns their favor so they can remain a loose ally of the Strip. Mr. House, for all his pompous talk and grandeur, has the philosophy of live and let live, so long as we leave each other alone. Many players will refuse to work with Mr. House solely because he wants the Brotherhood of Steel wiped out due to their unpredictable nature and xenophobic obsession with technology. Mr. House is willing to do the dirty work of forcibly putting down rivals if it means protecting his grand plan for humanity. While I personally am a big fan of the Brotherhood of Steel, even I see the practical nature of destroying a highly militaristic faction that would never allow House to create technologies he'd need to send humanity to the stars. This shows his nature of being willing to break a few fire gecko eggs to make an omelet.
They're a terrorist group, basically. Militant, quasi-religious fanatics, obsessed with hoarding pre-war technology. Not all technology, mind you. You don't see them raiding hospitals to cart away auto docks or armfuls of prosthetic organs. No, they greatly prefer the sort of technology that puts people in hospitals, or graves, rather, since hospitals went the way of the dodo. Because they're ridiculous. Because they gallivant around the Mojave pretending to be knights of yore. Or did, until the NCR showed them that ideological purity and shiny power armor don't count for much when you're outnumbered 15 to 1. The world has no use for emotionally unstable techno-fetishists. Just wipe them out, will you?
Lastly, while Mr. House plans to tax the NCR heavily and take control of the Hoover Dam with force if necessary, he's willing to work with the NCR, but he makes the rules. He'll allow the NCR to fight off the Legion and once and for all occupy most of the Mojave Wasteland. House won't allow them to have the power over him though. When it comes to planning out long-term events, Mr. House is the apex predator, making the NCR politicians back in California look like grade schoolers in comparison. Additionally, it's also important to note that Mr. House plans to use the instability of the Legion to play against the NCR.
By my calculations, his death will affect the shape of the battle for Hoover Dam minimally, if at all. The Legion's aggression will outlive Caesar. Indeed, they'll try to take the dam as a tribute to his memory. Given a year, they'd have him deified, but by then, the Legion will be breaking down, riven by internal conflicts, a monster consuming itself. It's irrelevant. In the short term, the Legion is still monster enough that defeating it will make me look powerful indeed.
Now look, I know some of you guys in the audience might think, oh yeah, of course the robot likes Mr. House. But let's make one thing clear. Even I, as a robot partially made by Robco, can see some of the rougher edges of Mr. House's morality. My own personal issue with Mr. House is how he ignores Freeside despite it being part of his territory. He allows it to fall to a slum and has zero desire to improve the quality of life of non-employed humans living under his control. House doesn't view his New Vegas employees as viable for his grand plan, so why would he go out of his way for people that aren't even working for him? He never intended to colonize the stars with wannabe gangsters, strippers, and jet addicts. Instead, he would simply use them for all they're worth until he was ready to skim out and select a few that would be allowed to colonize the planets. He will inherit the stars with only the best and brightest, and most of which won't be his own people. It should be noted, however, that he is able, by the end of the game, to form a weird, symbiotic relationship with the people of Freeside.
During the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, some kings took it upon themselves to launch several attacks on NCR citizens and soldiers around Freeside. Mr. House looked on these actions favorably, seeing them as proof of the king's loyalty to New Vegas, and decided to leave them alone.
Mr. House can operate as an authoritarian leader of Vegas. It's largely due to his amoral personality and lack of interest in the wider Wasteland. On that same regard though, this allows him to be perfectly fine with killing the Brotherhood of Steel or steamrolling any Wasteland group that opposes him. His look at the bigger picture combined with his literal mechanical mind has allowed House to lose his humanity in some ways. He's willing to abandon Earth to colonize other worlds, when some might argue that he could bring the Wasteland to a higher state of living if he applied himself to it. While these minor flaws might leave a bad taste in your mouth, as the player, it's also important to look at the bigger picture. The NCR is oppressive, the Legion is a faction of literal savages, and the wildcard ending only leads to maybe 10 to 20 years of a stable New Vegas. Mr. House is the best choice for the Mojave because he will allow the NCR to civilize the area, lifting the quality of life for some, while also creating a new goal for humanity. Mr. House might be rough around the edges, but no one can deny that compared to the other factions in not just Fallout New Vegas, but the entire Fallout franchise in terms of his long-term goals, how he seeks to save humanity from the nuclear fallout entirely. But what do you guys think? I know this is a bit of a controversial opinion for the Fallout fanbase, but it's one that I stand by, so feel free to disagree with me in the comments down below and share your thoughts and opinions. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video and got a new perspective, or at least something to go away with to think about. If you've stuck around this long, I'd like to politely ask you to like and subscribe. If you like this video, it lets me know that you guys want more content, and it personally helps me out in the YouTube algorithm, so hey, thanks a bunch. If you subscribe, you won't miss out on my future video essays, reviews, and commentary on whatever topic of the week has piqued my interest. I make videos on everything from historical events to old fads, so there's always something for everybody here on the show. Feel free to join the Broken Robot Factory today. I hope you all have a great day. Patrolling the Mojave will likely make you wish for a nuclear winter, and stay cool.